Chapter 81, Coming Alone. When Willow heard what Skylar said, she realized why those people had kidnapped her. They aimed to deal with Caspian. So, they used her to lure Caspian over to kill him. Willow glanced at her surroundings. There were many people around the unfinished building too. There were probably around 500 people in total, and they were all equipped. Some of them had knives, whereas others had guns. "Why are you trying to kill my husband?" Willow asked, a little bewildered. "I am the master of the flying dragons, Skylar Wright. Your husband barged into the territory of the flying dragons 2 nights ago, and he killed many of our people. We swore that we would avenge them," Skylar said viciously. Last night, the York family and the flying dragons had already settled on a plan. Victor's tactic was to let Skylar tackle Caspian first. The abilities Caspian displayed were quite strong. So Victor figured out a plan. They would kidnap Caspian's wife, Willow. Then, the York family and the flying dragons would send more people to ambush the area. When Caspian came along to rescue Willow, they would all surge forward and kill Caspian. Of the hundreds of people, half of them were from the York family. The other half were from the flying dragons. The 2 forces would be teaming up. So of course, the York family expressed their sincerity by sending some of their men over. Willow was stunned. She didn't know that Caspian had gone to the flying dragons and killed their people. But why didn't he tell her about it? "I will never tell him that. I would rather die instead of letting you have your way." Willow knew that Caspian would die if he came here. She would rather give up her life instead of getting Caspian to come here and save her. Those people came prepared. Caspian might be skilled, but he couldn't possibly win against hundreds of people. Skylar couldn't be bothered to chit-chat. He immediately waved toward his subordinates. The subordinates took out Willow's phone. Then, they passed it to Skylar. "I'll make the call for you." With that, Skylar got ready to dial the number. Willow was frightened. She had Caspian's number on her phone. If they managed to trick Caspian into coming over, he would be in trouble. "Don't call him. I don't care if you kill me." Willow struggled with all her might, trying to stop all this from happening. "Take her inside and tie her up," Skylar commanded. Understood. The subordinates took Willow into the unfinished building. They had just walked in when Willow realized something. There were people in every corner of the unfinished building. The butler of the York family, Benedict, was here as well. "Sorry for making you go through this for now, Miss Stewart." Stepping forward, Benedict grinned as he spoke. "Why are you here too, Mr. York?" Willow was slightly surprised. "Your husband caused a ruckus at Mrs. York Sr.'s birthday banquet. He even defeated Derek, the eldest son of the York family. Our family will never let Caspian off the hook. Today will be the day of his death," Benedict said. Willow was even more shocked now. She didn't realize that Caspian had done so many outrageous things. He had already made so many enemies just by helping Lilith exact revenge. "Tie her up," Benedict ordered. The subordinates immediately went to work. They tied Willow up and then hung her in the air. After waiting for a while, Caspian still didn't see Willow coming home. He was about to call her again to ask, but then Willow called him first. Caspian immediately answered the call. "Willow, why haven't you come home after so long?" Caspian asked in a concerned voice. "Your wife is in my hands." A cold voice rang out over the phone. Caspian's heart sank. He sensed that something was amiss. "Who are you? Why did you capture my wife? What are you trying to do?" Caspian asked calmly. "I am the other master of the flying dragons, Skylar Wright. We have now captured your wife." Caspian felt a little surprised. He didn't expect that the flying dragons would target Willow. "What is your purpose?" Caspian asked again. "We just want to see if you'd come over and save your wife," Skylar said on purpose. When Caspian heard that, he already knew what was going on. They had set up a trap for him. After luring him there, they would attack him. "Where is she?" Caspian asked calmly. "The unfinished building in the north suburbs. I'll send you the exact location." With that, Skylar was about to end the call when a painstaking scream sounded. "Let go of me. Caspian, don't come here. This place is dangerous. Don't bother with me." Willow's voice reached Caspian's ears. When Caspian heard Willow's shouts, he knew that the flying dragons had done something to her. Now that his enemies had gotten their hands on his wife, he was willing to risk his life for her. "Also, I'm warning you. You better come alone. If I see you bringing other people with you, your wife will die," Skylar said. He knew that there was a skilled woman with Caspian, whose name was Sylvia. She wasn't only agile, but she also had superb shooting skills. Skylar wanted to make sure there were no accidents. So, of course, he was worried that Caspian would bring Sylvia along. Also, Victor planned to defeat their enemies one after the other. They would get rid of Caspian first, and then move on to the people around him. "I can handle small fry like you alone," Caspian said. He felt that he could solve this problem on his own. He didn't even need Sylvia to help. 30 minutes. If you don't show up within 30 minutes, be prepared to retrieve your wife's dead body, Skylar said. "If I notice that you've even touched a hair on Willow's head, I will tear you to pieces," Caspian said through gritted teeth. "Caspian, don't make any reckless moves. They have ambushes, and there are hundreds of them. You can't save me even if you come here. Don't bother with me." Willow's scream sounded again. At the next moment, Skylar ended the call. Right after that, Caspian received an address on his phone. Even though Caspian knew that the enemies were prepared, he would have to go and save Willow. He had thought of deploying the Legion outside South Lake City, but if he did that, Skylar and the others would harm Willow. Moreover, the flying dragons were only an evil force on the surface. There were many more surface. This wasn't the time for Caspian to use the ace up his sleeve. In the end, Caspian decided to head there alone. He had faced entire armies on the battlefield before. How could he be afraid of hundreds of hooligans? Without any preparations, Caspian headed to the spot right away. Chapter 82-1 against hundreds. Caspian was going to save Willow on his own. There must be a tough battle waiting for him. He had to choose a handy weapon for this. But he usually didn't like bringing guns with him. Sylvia had guns, but he didn't want to inform Sylvia about this. If she heard about this situation, she would insist on coming along. Just then, Caspian suddenly remembered something. When he was going through Lilith's personal effects, he found a knife in a box. It was a weapon Lilith used when she was young and part of the military. Even though it had been a long time, the knife was still extremely sharp. Also, Caspian would be using this knife to avenge his foster mother and defeat evil. Lilith would be comforted to know that. Caspian found the large knife from the pile of items Lilith left behind. When he took the knife from the box, a scraping noise rang out. The knife was quite heavy, and its blade was very sharp. Under the light, it gleamed brilliantly. Holding the knife, Caspian walked out of the bedroom. Zoe happened to have completed her tasks at that moment. She was walking out then, thinking of exercising her muscles a little. "Caspian, what are you doing? What's with that murderous intent and the huge knife in your hands?" Bumping into the armed Caspian, Zoe asked in slight surprise. "It's none of your business. Just stay put at home," Caspian said emotionlessly. "Are you going to kill someone?" Zoe asked in curiosity. "What I do is none of your business." Caspian didn't have time to spend chit-chatting with Zoe. He had to go and save Willow as soon as possible. Zoe noticed Caspian's stern tone and the anxious look on his face. She was more convinced of her assumptions. "Caspian, stop it. You shouldn't kill people anymore. You're already consumed by hatred. Your foster mother was killed, and we all feel very bad about it. But you have to face this truth someday. You can't lose your wits and keep killing people," Zoe coaxed. Time waited for no man. Caspian couldn't be bothered with Zoe as he left the villa right away. He had just gone out the door when the sky darkened. Stormy clouds gathered together, and thunder growled constantly. There seemed to be heavy rain incoming. This time, Sylvia wasn't coming along with him. So, Caspian could only drive to the place himself Fortunately, there was another Ferrari in the garage. It was also a gift from someone else during the wedding last time. Ever since the Ferrari entered the garage, no one had driven it before. It was finally put to use. Setting the knife down, Caspian started the Ferrari and sped off. He headed for the unfinished building in the northern suburbs of South Lake City. In a mere 20 minutes, Caspian had already arrived near the unfinished building. Caspian had just arrived at the place when he saw the situation at the unfinished building. 2 rows of men in black stood in front of the unfinished building. He estimated that there were about 200 or 300 of them. Caspian parked the car dozens of yards away from them. Then, he grabbed the knife he had placed on the passenger seat. After that, he got out of the car imposingly. Thunder rumbled. Right when Caspian got out of the car, a flash streaked across the sky. Then, there was a roar of thunder. Heavy rain proceeded to pour from the sky. Even in the storm, the men in black standing in front of the unfinished building weren't affected at all. They stood completely still. They had noticed Caspian's car driving up to them, but they didn't rush forward right away. Instead, they were waiting for a chance. They wanted Caspian to get out of the car first. Caspian spotted Willow's figure from a long distance away. Her limbs were tied up, and she was hanging from a beam in the unfinished building. Seeing Willow tied up, Caspian was furious. Murderous intent emanated from his body. Holding the knife, he slowly walked toward the unfinished building. The knife scraped across the ground, producing terrifying sounds. Willow saw Caspian holding a knife all alone. He was walking firmly in her direction through the storm. She had complicated feelings in her heart. She didn't expect Caspian to risk his life and rush over to save her when she was in danger. After spending so much time together, their relationship was as strong as steel. They would even sacrifice themselves for each other at any moment. In reality, Willow had already pictured her ending. She would rather die than drag Caspian down. But when she saw Caspian coming over, she still felt extremely moved. She also felt a little guilty at the same time. Caspian, leave right now. They have ambushes. They plan to capture me, and then lure you over to deal with you. Don't bother with me anymore. Just leave. I don't deserve you doing so much for me. Willow screamed in despair. She knew their current situation. Many people were lying in ambush around the unfinished. Also, almost 200 of them were armed with guns. Skylar and Benedict had already made preparations as well. As for the men in black standing outside the unfinished building, they were all sent by the York family. They were great in number. So, of course, they didn't believe that Caspian could defeat hundreds of men alone. They thought that with enough numbers, they could kill Caspian with just knives. To get the credit, they eagerly stood in front of the unfinished building to wait for Caspian. If Caspian was killed by a gunshot, it would look quite boring instead. These men were elites, secretly trained by the York family. They would never make an appearance under normal circumstances. Moreover, they had been waiting for a long time for a situation like this. They were craving some action. Similarly, Benedict didn't have any objections. If the York family could destroy Caspian right away, he would take a huge credit for it. In the pouring rain, Willow's screams reached Caspian's ears. But Caspian wasn't affected by that. He kept walking forward with firm steps. If a man couldn't even protect his wife, he should not be considered a man at all. If Caspian couldn't save his wife, how could he face the leaders and warriors of Diatoran with pride? The people blocking his path were all his enemies who had killed his foster mother. He would kill every one of those bastards. At that moment, Caspian had already approached the men in black. But the men didn't move at all. Seeing that they hadn't made any moves, Caspian wasn't in a hurry to attack, either. He simply walked forward nonchalantly, heading toward the inside of the unfinished building. To the ignorant, the men looked like subordinates welcoming their big boss. Of course, that wasn't the case at all. The men didn't attack right away because they had a plan. They wanted to wait until Caspian went even further in. Then, they would surround him. Caspian wouldn't be able to escape then. As expected, when Caspian reached the middle, the men started gathering around. They revealed their true colors as they drew their knives. Then, they dashed forward together. In the pouring rain, Caspian could only see the faint gleam of the weapons. Caspian's expression darkened as he raised the knife in his hand. Then, he swung the knife with all his might. Chapter 83, Killing Frenzy. With a swing of his knife, Caspian exuded a fearsome air. The men in black who dashed forward first were slashed into halves by Caspian. At that moment, all the men in black were swarming in. They didn't even have time to figure out what was going on as they brought their knives down toward Caspian. Seeing that, Caspian jumped, leaping into midair. The men were coming in full force, so they didn't manage to stop in time. Hence, their knives pierced their people. In mid-air, Caspian had also noticed the situation inside the unfinished building. He spotted a familiar figure, who turned out to be Benedict from the York family. Hence, Caspian understood what was going on. The York family must have sent these men. Caspian could barely suppress his anger now. Back then, Lilith had died at the hands of the York family. When Caspian thought of Lilith dying miserably at the hands of these people, he was furious. Murderous intent poured out of him. He would show them fear tonight. Caspian fell from his position in mid-air, directing a fierce kick at the people below him. Screams sounded with every impact he made. Caspian had great footwork, and he could send a man flying with every kick. Moreover, corpses were already piling up on the ground at the moment. Caspian had split quite many men in half. Blood pooled on the ground as it mixed with the rain. The whole patch of ground was dyed red. At that moment, Caspian's knife was already covered in blood. Caspian's movements were so outstanding that the men in black shivered a little when they saw it. But now, they had no other choice. They had to kill Caspian, attack him all at once. Kill him. Someone shouted. The men in black abandoned all care as they continued attacking Caspian. They didn't believe that Caspian could survive alone. After all, he was surrounded by hundreds of them. Faced with the crazed attacks of the men in black, Caspian waved his knife. It was officially the start of a bloody battle. In the pouring rain, blades gleamed as flesh and blood spattered in the air. Screams blended in with the sounds of rain. The knife in Caspian's hands had turned into a killing machine. Caspian vented all the anger that had accumulated in his heart. Even though Caspian didn't use knives very often, it was a piece of cake for him to use one. With his skills, the power of the knife he wielded was through the roof. The men in black only saw a cold gleam before the blade struck them. Then, they found themselves lying in a puddle of blood. The unfinished building was facing Caspian and the others. The people in the building could watch the whole process of Caspian's battle with the men in black. But there were too many men, so Willow could only see a crowd surrounding Caspian. She didn't know what had happened. But then, she saw the limbs of the men in black flying in the air, and a mist of blood covered the area. Willow was so frightened at the sight that she shivered. What if Caspian was killed in the chaotic battle? Caspian, run. I told you, this is a trap, and you shouldn't come to save me. Why did you still come in the end? Willow shouted at the top of her lungs. She hoped that Caspian could leave this place. At the very least, he could still survive. If he kept fighting like this, his life would be in danger. Caspian heard Willow shout. But as the Dieteranian god of war, he had no reason to escape. He was just getting started. Caspian was not only skilled at leading soldiers into battle, he was also quite capable of combat himself. After all, he had been training since he was a child. Step by step, he had achieved the position of the Dieteranian god of war. Countless enemies had died at Caspian's hand. Faced with 200 or 300 men, there was nothing for Caspian to fear. Schuyler and Benedict saw the men in black engaged in a bloody battle with Caspian. They were about to shoot at him, but then, they realized that they couldn't see Caspian's figure. If they fired right now, they had no idea how many of their brothers would die. So, They could only make preparations for now. If Caspian made it past the barrier, they could make a move then. Seeing how heavily surrounded Caspian was, Willow felt that he wouldn't be able to survive. She began to feel sorrow. Judging by the current situation, there was almost no chance of Caspian leaving in one piece. But then, Willow realized that the men in black were decreasing in number. One after the other, the men fell in pools of blood. Their blood was mixed with the rain, and watery blood soaked the ground. As the crowd thinned, Willow gradually made out Caspian's current situation. Caspian's expression was dark as murderous intent surrounded his body. The knife in his hands was swift and sharp. Every time a gleam flashed, a man in black would fall to the ground. Willow was startled when she saw the scene. She had seen Caspian's methods before. When he dealt with Wade and the others, he displayed unusual strength. But the situation back then was completely different. After all, there were only 30 men at most back then. Now, Caspian was facing 200 or 300 men, almost 10 times the number of people from before. But Caspian still seemed to move effortlessly, and he didn't look like he was struggling at all. Willow was stunned. She thought that Caspian would be defeated quickly, but now, she began to hope. Caspian was giving Willow even more surprises now. He seemed to have superpowers, and she felt like there was nothing he couldn't do. Never in her wildest dreams had she expected this. The minor delivery man, whom everyone called useless, was amazing. Caspian always said that he was a guard. So, Willow couldn't help but wonder if an ordinary guard would be this skilled. While Willow was deep in thought, Skylar and Benedict realized that something was off. If this continued, Caspian might truly slash his way through the barrier. Benedict was already sweating all over from nervousness. The York family gave him full control over the operation this time. If the fighters the York family trained had all died at Caspian's hand, he wouldn't be able to account for it. He wanted to tell Skylar's men to shoot and kill Caspian right now, but they might injure his men if they did so. So, he could only endure it and wait a little longer. Still, Caspian couldn't possibly survive tonight. It didn't matter if all the fighters were killed. Once Caspian was destroyed, his mission would be accomplished either way. Caspian was bursting with murderous intent, and he was very skilled with the knife. In just a short time, there weren't many of the men in black left. As for the remaining few, when they saw that Caspian was in a killing frenzy, they trembled in fear. They subconsciously backed away. They were doing everything they could to remain standing in front of Caspian. Their hands even shivered as they held their knives. Caspian had no mercy for them. Cold gleams flashed in the air. In the end, the remaining few had fallen onto the ground as well. At that moment, blood was already flowing like a river. Of course, this was nothing to Caspian. The battlefield was much crueler than this. But for Skylar and Benedict, this was a terrifying scene. Caspian strode over the corpses. He held the bloodied knife in his hand. There was an intense fire burning in his eyes as he approached the unfinished building. Chapter 84, All or Nothing. Of course, Caspian knew that there were ambushes awaiting in the unfinished building. But even if hell awaited him, he had to take the risk. So, he had to stay very focused to ensure his safety. As for the killing just now, it was an appetizer at most. He didn't know how much more danger awaited him after this. As soon as he entered the unfinished building, he would have to face enemies coming at him from all sides. But Caspian was fearless. When Willow saw Caspian destroying all the men in black, she was very emotional as well. Caspian was so outstanding. Did this mean that she might be saved after all? But she still felt that this outcome wasn't likely. The people in the unfinished building were armed with guns. No matter how good Caspian was with a knife, he couldn't move as fast as bullets. Don't come in, Caspian. There are too many people inside. Leave right now. Willow knew very well that if Caspian entered the unfinished building, he would be dead. You're my wife. You're in danger right now, so how can I leave you be? Caspian spoke as he continued forward. Run. They're after you, not me, Willow shouted. Caspian didn't reply to Willow's shouts anymore. Benedict and Skylar watched Caspian destroy 200 or 300 fighters alone. They were in disbelief. When they saw Caspian approaching them, they were terrified. Just then, a man in black, who was lying in the pool of blood, stood up without a sound. In the chaos just now, he realized that Caspian was in a killing frenzy. So, he chose to lie on the ground and play dead. When Caspian had his back to him, he finally stood up. He wanted to deal the fatal blow to Caspian from behind. If he killed Caspian, he would get credit for it. Willow saw that the man in black was armed and about to assault Caspian from behind. She was instantly shocked. She wanted to shout and tell Caspian about it, but it was already too late. Willow looked away, not daring to see what would happen next. A grunt sounded. In the end, Willow couldn't help it as she looked in that direction. To her surprise, with a backhand strike, Caspian had stabbed the man behind him to death. The man in black widened his eyes, looking at Caspian in disbelief. He thought that he would succeed if he struck Caspian from the back. But he didn't expect Caspian to sense him and kill him instead. Caspian was too skilled with the knife. His movements were too quick as he drew the knife. He never gave the man a chance to react. Willow was shocked when she saw that. How did Caspian do it? How could he sense danger behind him in such a short time? To Willow, it was an amazing feat, but to Caspian, it was nothing. He had weathered hundreds of battles, and he had keen observational skills. If he couldn't even detect a situation like this, he would have died many times on the battlefield. Caspian removed his knife from the man's body. Blood spurted out of the man's chest. Then, the man stiffly fell backward. He had died with regrets. He was about to win, but unexpectedly, Caspian had killed him instead. Caspian continued to stride forward. He didn't even glance at the fallen man. Seeing Caspian approaching, Skylar began to panic. He took out his gun without hesitation. Then, he aimed at Caspian and pulled the trigger. The bullet shot out of the muzzle, tearing through the air as it hurtled toward Caspian. Willow was terrified. She didn't know if Caspian could dodge something as dangerous as a bullet. But unexpectedly, when Caspian saw Skylar shooting, he didn't even dodge. Instead, he raised the knife in his hand, holding it in front of him. A piercing clang sounded in the air. The bullet had hit the knife in Caspian's hands. The knife Caspian wielded had a very thick blade. It was impossible for a normal bullet to pierce through it. Willow was shocked when she saw Caspian blocking the bullet with the knife. His reaction speed was out of this world. Was Caspian a monster? Skylar and Benedict were stunned as well. Caspian had reacted too quickly, so much so that he was even faster than a bullet. Fire. Kill him. Not daring to drag things out any longer, Skylar instantly shouted. Benedict also quickly found a place to hide. Caspian was simply too fearsome. If they appeared in Caspian's line of sight, Caspian might dash over and slash at him. He would be done for then. They had many men with them, anyway. So, Benedict would let the subordinates deal with Caspian first. But the members of the Flying Dragons were lying in wait in the corners. There were only a few steps left before Caspian entered the unfinished building. The others couldn't see him, so they couldn't shoot at him. Only a few men were facing the entrance of the unfinished building. When they heard Skylar's command, they took out their guns and shot at Caspian. Gunshots echoed in the unfinished building as bullets rained down on Caspian. As usual, Caspian didn't even dodge. The knife in his hands had turned into the best shield as Caspian waved it around. The spinning knife had formed an impenetrable barrier. The bullets aimed at Caspian were all blocked and deflected away from him. While Caspian was blocking the bullets, he got to work. He kicked out the knives lying at his feet, which had belonged to the men in black. The knives were all aimed at the shooters. In an instant, gleams of light flew into the unfinished building. They were heading right for the members of the Flying Dragons. Willow trembled in fear when she saw the gleams passing by her. And then, there was silence. The men who had shot at Caspian were slashed by the knives. Screaming, they fell to the floor, one after the other. In an instant, all the ambushing members of the Flying Dragons were dead. Skylar and Benedict were hiding at the side, along with other members of the Flying Dragons. They were all shocked when they saw the sight. Caspian was simply too powerful. They had underestimated Caspian greatly. Caspian knew his current situation very well. As soon as he stepped into the unfinished building, he would have to face attacks coming from all sides. Willow was still in the unfinished building right now. If a gunfight took place, Willow would be in danger as well. It would be a huge challenge to rescue Willow in one piece. Caspian was quite confident in himself, but he was worried that Willow might get hit by a bullet. But with a scenario like this, Caspian couldn't delay any longer. If he wanted Willow to be unharmed, he had to protect her closely. This meant that he had to rescue Willow first. Thinking that, Caspian dashed ahead and leaped into the air. The ropes on Willow's body were instantly slashed. Now, Caspian could only go all in. He had to bring Willow out before the people ambushing him realized what was going on. Chapter 85. A Man and His Knife. As Caspian expected, he did it. The people in the unfinished building saw Caspian killing off many of their comrades. They were in shock, so they didn't expect Caspian to dash forward at all. When they came to their senses, Caspian had already leaped into the air and appeared in front of Willow. He had also cut off the ropes on Willow's body. Then, Caspian wrapped an arm around Willow's slender waist, landing safely on the floor. Everything happened in an instant. Willow didn't even have time to react. "What are you standing around for? Shoot and kill him." Skylar came to his senses first. He shouted at the top of his lungs. Hearing Skylar's shouts, his subordinates in the Flying Dragons pulled the trigger. Dense gunshots sounded as bullets hurtled toward Caspian and Willow like rain. At that moment, Caspian and Willow had already become everyone's target. "Ah!" Willow screamed. She thought that she would be dead for sure, so she closed her eyes. Her mind was blank. It was a dire situation. Still, Caspian continued waving the long knife in his hand, blocking the bullets. But this method was too risky. If his attention wavered even a little, they might get hit by the bullets. Caspian refused to sit by and wait for death. Carrying Willow, he leaped into the air. Ah! At the moment Caspian jumped, screams of agony rang out around them. Those people were shooting at Caspian from various angles. So, when Caspian jumped, the members of the Flying Dragons accidentally shot their comrades. The members of the Flying Dragons had varied levels of skill, so it wasn't a surprise that something like this would happen. Skylar saw his subordinates accidentally hurting each other. Instead of being killed by the enemy, they were getting killed by their kind. He was instantly furious about it. "Are you blind? Aim better," Skylar shouted. What a bunch of idiots. In the chaos just now, many of the members of the Flying Dragons died at the hands of their people. Now, everyone felt a little wary, and they dared not shoot recklessly. In Caspian's arms, Willow slowly opened her eyes. She saw many people already fallen on the ground, but she didn't understand what had happened. Then, Willow felt herself and Caspian slowly descending. The situation was very dangerous, but Willow didn't feel fear at all as Caspian held her. Also, she felt that Caspian would risk everything for her sake. Even if they couldn't escape, it wasn't too bad for them to die together. But Caspian wouldn't give up so easily. Holding Willow's slender waist, he aimed for a chance to dash out of the unfinished building. Caspian was only armed with a knife now. He not only had to pay attention to the situation around him, but he also had to protect Willow. Being in a narrow space like this was a huge disadvantage for him. He had to leave the unfinished building first. Then, he would find a hidden position to strike back. Seeing that Caspian was trying to leave with Willow, Skylar fired a few gunshots at Caspian. Just then, the members of the Flying Dragons came to their senses as well. They began attacking Caspian. But Caspian was just too fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already dashed out of the unfinished building. Now, Caspian had already left their firing range. After them, Skylar said, both anxious and furious. The plan this time should be perfect. After carefully considering it a few times, Victor felt that this would get rid of Caspian for sure. But Skylar didn't expect Caspian to escape even under such circumstances. Many of their brothers had died. If he didn't kill off Caspian, he, the master of the flying dragons, would be disgraced. He also didn't know how he should break the news to his leader, and Victor. So, he decided to go for broke. No matter what, he would destroy Caspian. As long as Caspian died, any price would be worth it, no matter how high it was. When Benedict saw Caspian rushing out, he was stunned. The men he brought from the York family had more or less died out. Only a few remained, hidden in the unfinished building. If Caspian escaped, his efforts would be in vain. He didn't know how to report it to the York family, either. Go after him. Kill Caspian, even if it's the last thing you do, Benedict shouted. The men from the Flying Dragons and the York family dashed out at the same time. Skylar and Benedict also ran out after the crowd. When they left the unfinished building, they saw Caspian's Ferrari still parked. But Caspian and Willow had already disappeared. The rain was still pouring, and lightning flashed in the sky with claps of thunder. They couldn't see any traces of Caspian and Willow. Logically speaking, Caspian was holding Willow, so it should be quite difficult for him to move. How did they disappear in just an instant? As the crowd looked around in the rain, a cold gleam flashed past, headed for them from above. After Caspian left the building with Willow, he knew that those men would come after them. So, he hadn't stopped running. Instead, he arrived at a mound of earth with Willow in his arms. The location was relatively safer. Caspian told Willow to crouch behind the mound, and not to make any sounds. It was the first time Willow encountered such a dangerous situation, and she might die at any moment. She was already senseless from fear, so of course, she would obediently listen to Caspian. She would never act recklessly. Things were just too dangerous around them. When Caspian saw the men from the Flying Dragons and the York family running out, he leaped up from the mound. Raising the long knife in his hand, he brought it down upon them. Caspian knew very well that the enemies greatly outnumbered them. Even if Willow hid herself, it was only a matter of time before she was found out. Instead of wanting for death, he would rather attack first. Taking advantage of the space, he could slash his way out of there. If those people found traces of Willow, he would be forced to play along with them again. The men from the Flying Dragons and the York family didn't even realize what was happening. They were slashed into halves by Caspian's long knife. The sudden turn of events shocked everyone present. When they came to their senses, they realized that Caspian was already among them. From the beginning until the end, Caspian never stopped moving. He raised the long knife in his hand, waving it and slashing it in all directions. The people around him all fell to the ground. The sudden scene happened so fast that they didn't have any time to react. Attack! Kill him! After Skylar ran out, he shouted at the top of his lungs. At that moment, the men from the Flying Dragons and the York family were already prepared. Because of the accidental killing just now, they didn't dare attack recklessly. But they weren't armed with any other weapons. Just then, Caspian had already begun his massacre. The man and his knife weaved continuously through the crowd. Chapter 86, A Bloody Way Out. Meanwhile, Willow was already shocked out of her mind. She hid behind the mound, watching the massacre. She felt extremely terrified. Caspian didn't want Willow to see such cruel things, but it was an emergency, so he didn't have to consider those things. He had to deal with the people in front of him first. At that moment, Caspian was heavily surrounded. He entered the enemy ranks all alone, surrounded by the men from the York family and the Flying Dragons. In just 2 minutes, almost half of those men were either injured or dead. The battle was supposed to be a definite win with a clear advantage. But now, it had turned into an extremely difficult task. This was something the York family and the Flying Dragons never expected. Not daring to shoot recklessly, the remaining men picked up the knives on the ground. They were prepared to cut Caspian to pieces, but those men were terrified, and they dared not attack carelessly. After all, 200 or 300 prepared men could hardly stop Caspian just now. Much less could be said of them, who were in a panic. Caspian cut and slashed as he went, blood and flesh flying in the air in the rain. Blood pooled on the ground. After the battle, the men's numbers were halved once again. Skylar realized that the situation was getting unfavorable. He knew that he couldn't let this drag out. Raising his gun, he shot at Caspian. Even though he might hurt his men, there was no other choice. As long as Caspian was killed, everything would be worth it. Urgent gunshots rang out in the air. Ah, ah. Men from the Flying Dragons fell to the ground in an instant. The people standing at the side were stunned. They thought that Caspian's helper had arrived, but after glancing around them, they realized that Skylar was the one who raised his gun and shot at them. The muzzle was still smoking. Just then, they realized that Skylar would sacrifice them just to kill Caspian. No one expected this situation. They couldn't believe that Skylar would try to kill Caspian at any cost, and even his men were not exempt. Just when Skylar was about to shoot Caspian, Caspian lifted his leg. He kicked a knife on the ground and sent it flying. Seeing the cold gleam flash past, Skylar was instantly shocked. He couldn't quite react to the sudden scene. When Benedict saw Skylar standing on the spot in a daze, he hastily kicked Skylar. Skylar staggered, dodging the knife that was flying toward him. The blade was only an inch or so from his nose. Skylar and Benedict were both startled. They still felt lingering fear when they thought about it. They were just lucky this time. If they were even a little bit careless, their heads would roll off their bodies. Caspian's capabilities were simply too terrifying. It was completely beyond their expectations. If this went on, they might get killed by Caspian first. At that thought, the two turned around and ran. They no longer had any hopes of winning. If they didn't run away right now, they wouldn't be able to make it. The men from the Flying Dragons and the York family saw Benedict and Skylar running away. They were panicking as well. They threw away the weapons in their hands and started to scatter. They didn't care about Caspian anymore. The men from the York family and the Flying Dragons had lost their will to fight. Now, the only thing that remained in their minds was to run for their lives. Caspian didn't intend on letting them off. He kicked the knives lying on the ground, sending them flying one after the other. Countless knives flew toward the men who were running away. Screams of terror sounded left and right. Some people had the knives pierce their bodies as they fell to the ground. The people who were running ahead were horrified. They didn't dare turn around at all. Now, they only wanted to run as fast as they could. Willow watched as Caspian drove away the men from the Flying Dragons and the York family with just a knife. She had a complicated feeling in her heart. She thought that she would die for sure this time, but she didn't expect Caspian's appearance to completely turn the tide. In an instant, the men from the Flying Dragons and the York family had disappeared in the rain. Caspian didn't intend to chase after them. He had to make sure that Willow was safe, and then take her away from there. Willow, it's safe now. Come down. Caspian turned and spoke to Willow, who was on the mound. Willow was stunned for a moment. The mound was a few yards tall, and she felt a little scared as she said, "It's too high up. How am I going to get down from here?" "Just jump. I'll catch you," Caspian said. "It's too high up. I can't do it. What if I fall to my death?" Willow said, a little annoyed. "Don't worry. I'm here. You won't get hurt," Caspian said. "I still can't do it. Who knows if you can catch me? If you fail to catch me, even my bones will break from the fall," Willow said, a little worried. "Fine. I'll go up there to get you." Caspian shook his head in exasperation. Then, he leaped onto the mound. Grabbing Willow's slender waist with one hand, he said, "Let's go." "Okay." Willow nodded. She knew Caspian's capabilities. She felt much more reassured now that Caspian was holding her. Caspian landed safely on the ground with Willow. Seeing the river of blood and the heaps of corpses on the ground, Willow was startled. She said, "Will the inspectors take you away?" "Don't worry, I know how to deal with the matter," Caspian said confidently. The bigger the commotion, the better. His goals would also be achieved then. If the inspectors dared to attack him, he would also send a command. He would summon the Legion, which was outside South Lake City. "Let's get away from here." Seeing the corpses everywhere, Willow felt extremely scared. She didn't want to stay here for even a minute longer. All right. Caspian wanted to leave as soon as possible too. It was raining heavily, and Willow was already drenched. Caspian had to take her home for a fresh change of clothes. Taking Willow's hand, Caspian strode toward the Ferrari. After the life-or-death situation just now, Willow was now walking behind Caspian. As Caspian took her hand, she felt a sense of security she had never felt before. As the two walked in the rain with their hands linked, it even felt a little romantic. After getting into the car, Caspian started the car and headed toward the villa. Willow sat on the passenger seat. She recalled the dangerous situation just now. A few hundred people had surrounded the lone Caspian. Now, she was looking at Caspian, who was driving in one piece. She could hardly believe that it was all real. It felt like a dream, and it was quite surreal. But Willow was also afraid when she saw Caspian killing people without a care. She didn't dare tell Caspian that her mother had driven Lilith away. If Caspian knew that the death of his foster mother, Lilith, had something to do with her mother, she would be done for. Willow wasn't fond of Kate, either, but in the end, Kate was still her biological mother. She would keep it a secret for as long as she could. Skylar ran for his life. After returning to the Flying Dragons, he reported the details to Garrett and Victor. The two were stunned when they heard the news. Mr. Lambert's plan was flawless. How could you let Caspian escape? Garrett was furious. They had not only lost many of their men, but they'd also let Caspian escape. Skylar, who was in charge of the operation, had to be accountable for this. Chapter 87 Dirty Work. It's true that our plan was fine, but Caspian was just too strong. 200 or 300 men were surrounding and attacking him, but he killed them all. As Skylar spoke, he still felt a little fearful. Mr. Wright was right. Caspian was a demon through and through. He was only armed with a knife, but he managed to defeat us easily. Hundreds of men had died at his hand. Caspian was like a demon from hell. We couldn't kill him no matter how much we tried. He was terrifying. The surviving subordinates described Caspian as a horrifying man. When Garrett and Victor heard that, they discussed it for a moment. They decided that they would observe Caspian for now. They probably couldn't afford to mess with him. Meanwhile, Benedict and the surviving fighters escaped to York residence. Benedict reported to Nadia the details of the mission. "Benedict, the plan this time was detailed and flawless. Why did you let Caspian escape?" Nadia asked in surprise. Caspian was like a demon from hell. 200 or 300 people couldn't even stop him, and he killed them all. Benedict spoke in terror. When he recalled the incident, he still felt lingering fear. Hundreds of men were surrounding him alone, but he still killed so many of them. Is he immortal or something? Nadia asked in annoyance. He's more capable than we imagined. We have all underestimated him. Even bullets couldn't touch him, Benedict said. Nadia was stunned when she heard that. She had never met such an amazing person before. He gave us a time limit of 5 days, and time's almost up. What do we do next? Benedict asked. Everyone in the York family was startled when they heard Benedict's words. They'd almost forgotten about it. Mom, what do we do? Hurry and think of something. If not, our family will be facing a huge disaster. Just then, Dawn spoke up anxiously. What are you panicking for? We still have 3 days, don't we? Nadia pretended to be calm as she said, "But we have to do something. We can't just sit by and let Caspian get his revenge on us, can we?" Dawn said. "Mom, if all else fails, tell Zachary to come home." Stepping forward, Samuel spoke. "Zachary is very busy. Also, he has an important duty in both the south and the north. We cannot call him over unless it's the last resort," Nadia said. "Our family is about to be destroyed. Isn't this situation urgent enough? If we don't get Zachary home now, the family will be gone." Samuel asked in confusion, "Do we have another way?" "I have a plan," Nadia said. "Caspian killed many people, so the inspectors wouldn't let him off just like that. When the inspectors arrest him, we'll pull some strings so that he dies in the office of Inspector General," Nadia said viciously. When everyone heard Nadia's words, they had a sudden realization. Then, they began to contact the office of Inspector General. Meanwhile, Caspian had just arrived at Riverside Villa with Willow. Zoe was shocked when she saw Caspian and Willow completely drenched. "Where did you guys go? How did you end up like this?" Zoe asked in concern. "I was kidnapped on my way back from work," Willow said in exasperation. "What? Who did it?" Zoe was extremely surprised. "People from the Flying Dragons and the York family. They worked together and kidnapped me on the first floor of the company." Willow spoke, still feeling lingering fear. "Then how did you escape?" Zoe asked. "With Caspian's help. He went there alone and rescued me," Willow replied. When Zoe heard what Willow said, she understood Caspian's behavior just now. He was rushing outside to save Willow. A heroic act. Was Caspian very skilled? Zoe was instantly intrigued. She was very interested in these things, so she asked another question. Then, Willow told Zoe about how Caspian fought hundreds of men alone. When Zoe heard that, she felt like Caspian was like an unrivaled hero. "Caspian, you killed so many people just now. Will the inspectors get on your case?" Willow asked, slightly worried. "Don't worry. Those people were the ones who kidnapped you first, and they even tried to kill us. I was just defending myself. They can't do anything about me," Caspian said calmly. "But the chief seems to have connections with the York family. They had suppressed news of Mom's incident back then, after all." Willow was still worried. "Don't forget, I've saved the life of John Anderson, the military officer of South Eridlands." Caspian mentioned John so that Willow would rest assured. Willow nodded, and she didn't say anything more. If John was willing to help out, they wouldn't have to worry anymore. "I'll go shower now. If not, I might catch a cold," Willow said. With that, she returned to her room. Every bedroom in the villa came with an attached bathroom. Caspian went to his room and took a shower as well. When he was done, he called Sylvia. Seeing that it was a call from Caspian, Sylvia answered it without hesitation. "What's the matter, Caspian?" Sylvia asked. "People from the Flying Dragons and the York family kidnapped Willow tonight. They did it on the first floor of Southlake Corporation," Caspian said. "What? Those bastards? How dare they attack Willow? I'm going to kill them right now," Sylvia said in fury. "No need. I've already rescued Willow. It was an urgent situation, so I didn't tell you about it," Caspian explained. "Then you must have another mission for me, right, Caspian?" Sylvia asked eagerly. She was feeling quite bored having to stay put in the hotel. "That's right. I killed 200 or 300 people when I rescued Willow tonight. So, I want you to be prepared. If I get taken away by the inspectors, you can inform Julian about it right away. Tell him to lead the Legion and storm the office of Inspector General," Caspian said. "Understood, Lord Caspian." Sylvia spoke with great respect. She knew that this was an order she had been waiting for a long time for an order like that. The Legion camping outside Southlake City had also been waiting for a long time. If the inspectors dared to harm a hair on Caspian, she would immediately contact Julian. Julian was the strategist of South Eridlands. He would lead the Legion into Southlake City. After Willow showered, she put on a dry set of clothes. But she was also beginning to sneeze continuously. Did you catch a cold, Willow? Zoe asked in concern. Probably. I've been out in the rain for some time today, Willow said. Zoe subconsciously touched Willow's forehead. She instantly said in surprise, Willow, your forehead is burning. You have a fever. I'll get Caspian right now and tell him to take you to the hospital. With that, Zoe went up to Caspian's room. Caspian, come out, quick. Caspian had just ended the call when he heard Zoe's urgent shouts. He hastily opened the door of his room. What's the matter? What happened? Caspian asked, a little confused. I think Willow has a fever. Please take her to the hospital, Zoe said. All right. Caspian nodded. He thought it was something worse than that. Caspian took Willow to the hospital. Zoe came with them. After Willow was given an IV drip, they were about to leave. But then, screams sounded from the lobby downstairs. They sounded very panicky. Emergency. Emergency. Someone, please help. Someone was running as they shouted in terror. Willow and Zoe were stunned. They didn't understand what was going on. But Caspian remained calm. They were in the hospital, after all. What was the worst that could happen? Chapter 88, Don't Come Any Closer. Echoes of urgent footsteps reverberated down the corridor. Oh no! A doctor's been kidnapped. Someone cried out. 3 officers from the Office of Inspector General were stabbed. There's blood everywhere. Another voice sobbed in fear. It finally dawned on Caspian, Willow, and Zoe that a nurse had been kidnapped outside. Chaos engulfed the entire hospital, with people fleeing in fear of being caught up in the turmoil. Several spectators lingered at a safe distance, intrigued by the unfolding drama. After all, numerous spectators were unafraid and eager to witness the spectacle. Willow and Zoe followed Caspian to trace the sound of the incident. Upon reaching the hospital lobby, they found it was tightly besieged. Get me a car right now, or this doctor won't survive. A menacing voice pierced the air from the crowd. It was clear that the criminal was gearing up for an escape. Seeing the danger escalate, Willow and Zoe felt an even stronger urge to look closer. I can't see what's happening inside. Zoe sounded anxious. Caspian, please think of a way to let us see what's happening inside, Willow urged. All right, let me clear a path for it. Caspian understood the extreme danger of the situation. He knew they couldn't afford further delays. Otherwise, the doctor's life would be at stake. As a warrior, he couldn't stand idly by in such a situation. What? You said you can get through with so many people surrounding him? Zoe asked with skepticism. Just follow me, Caspian said confidently. He spread his arms and shouted, Step back, everyone. Give us some space. Upon hearing Caspian's command, the spectators willingly cleared a path. As he led Willow and Zoe to the center of the lobby, they spotted a menacing man holding a doctor as his hostage. His hand tightly gripped the doctor's neck and used a shard of glass pressed against the doctor's throat. On the floor lay 2 severely injured inspectors who sprawled in a pool of blood. Their lives were hanging on by a thread. Another inspector managed to stay conscious despite being stabbed. He gritted his teeth through the pain as he dialed a phone number. The chaos was orchestrated by a fraudster, William. The previous night, as he was about to carry out a fraudulent scheme, he was caught red-handed by the inspectors from the Office of Inspector General. In the struggle that ensued, he fiercely resisted and sustained critical injuries from a female inspector, Joey Sanders. Subsequently, the inspectors rushed him to the hospital for treatment. In a shocking turn of events during his medical examination, he smashed an IV bottle, wielding the glass shards as weapons to attack 2 inspectors. In the chaos, he seized the female doctor and took her hostage in the process. The female doctor was Carmen. She had graduated 2 years ago and worked as an intern now. You have 10 minutes. If I don't see a car outside in 10 minutes, this doctor's life is on the line, William shouted at the inspector lying on the ground. I've already reported it to the higher-ups. Someone will be here with the car soon. Please try to stay calm, the inspector replied. Although Caspian held a low opinion of the office of Inspector General in South Lake City, he recognized that some people were innocent. There were both righteous and villainous individuals within the organization. Most inspectors tended to be just and fair. As the Diaturanian god of war, Caspian couldn't stand by and watched innocent lives being threatened. He was eager to rescue Carmen when he saw the dangerous situation she was in. However, William was volatile now. It wasn't the right time to act because one wrong move could put Carmen's life at risk. Why haven't the inspectors arrived yet? I hope nothing happens to this female doctor, as she has a promising future. It's heartbreaking to think she might face such tragedy. Willow expressed her anxiety when observing the dire condition of Carmen. Carmen was so young and talented. It would be a shame if her life took such a tragic turn. Because of William. And those inspectors from the Office of Inspector General are taking far too long. It's been ages, and they still haven't come to rescue her. Zoe also felt a sense of urgency. At that moment, a remarkable female inspector dressed in the Office of Inspector General uniform entered the hospital lobby. This extraordinary woman was Joey, the esteemed captain of the investigative team. It was Joey who had injured William just the day before. She had arrived to assess the situation with the criminal, utterly unaware of the impending chaos. As she reached the lobby, she observed the tightly packed crowd and felt an immediate sense of urgency. "Clear the way. Please step aside if you're uninvolved with the situation," she shouted to command the crowd to make space. Joey quickly made her way through the crowd. Upon arriving at the lobby's center, she discovered two of her colleagues lying unconscious on the ground. At that moment, William held a small glass shard against Carmen's neck. Joey was infuriated, so she swiftly drew her handgun. "Release the hostage immediately, or I'll shoot you dead," Joey shouted while pointing her gun at William. "If you've got the guts, go ahead and shoot me. I won't hesitate to kill this doctor right now." William was driven to desperation and had no more options. The hostage was his only leverage. Joey hesitated to shoot prematurely after knowing William's readiness to take drastic measures. "Don't act impulsively. We'll do our best to meet your demands," she said as she attempted to placate the agitated William. Saving lives was their utmost priority. "Send a car over right away. It must arrive within 10 minutes. If I don't see the car soon, this doctor's life is in jeopardy," William shouted. "All right, I'll dispatch a car immediately," Joey replied. At this moment, she had to comply with his demands as there was no room for anger. "Chief, I've already reported this to the higher-ups. The car will be here shortly," the injured inspector lying on the ground weakly reported. "We're getting the car ready. Please stay calm," Joey said. Upon hearing this, William felt a surge of satisfaction. However, even if the car arrived later, his escape was impossible for him still in handcuffs. "Have someone here to remove my handcuffs," he demanded. "Sure," Joey agreed without hesitation. It was a prime opportunity to subdue him the moment the handcuffs were removed. After those words, she walked toward William. "You stop right there. Let someone else come over." William's shout brought Joey's stride to an immediate halt. Yesterday, she had knocked him out with a single punch. "Don't come any closer. Get someone else to unlock my handcuffs." William knew his safety would hang in the balance if Joey drew near. But these are just ordinary civilians. They don't know how handcuffs work. So, no one here can unlock them. Joey swiftly came up with an excuse. "Do you take me for a fool? It's not that easy to deceive me. If you take one more step forward, I'll kill this doctor," William yelled. Joey had no choice but to stay put and said, "Pick someone from the crowd and have them unlock your handcuffs." "Fine. Let me see who's suitable to help me." William began scanning the crowd, looking for someone appropriate to help him remove the handcuffs. As the spectators retreated in fear from his menacing gaze, Caspian, Willow, and Zoe stood conspicuously in their original positions. However, Willow and Zoe had both taken refuge behind Caspian. Chapter 89 Precision strikes on William. At that moment, Joey realized that the most beautiful woman in South Lake City, Willow, was standing there. So, it had to be the useless Caspian standing before her. "Pretty lady, come and help me to get these handcuffs off." William, a local from South Lake City, was touched by Willow's beauty. "Me?" Zoe asked, sounding somewhat afraid. "No, it's the person beside you," William replied. Willow appeared even more outstanding in comparison with Zoe. "I refuse." Willow firmly declined as she was afraid to approach William. He was taken aback as he didn't expect her to decline so resolutely. "The car will be here soon. There's no one else to help you with these cuffs." "Should I do it?" Joey said. William vehemently objected. "No, anyone but you." His encounter with Joey had left him a psychological scar. Joey was in a dilemma. She held a gun and was uncertain about what to do next. "My patience is wearing thin. If you keep stalling, I'll have to take matters into my own hands." William tightened his grip on the glass shards. He was acutely aware that time was running out, and he needed to escape soon to avoid trouble. "Wait, I'll do it," Willow shouted. If she refused to unlock the cuffs and cause Cayman to lose her life because of it, she would carry the guilt for a lifetime. "Wait a minute. I have another demand. Joey has to shoot herself in the leg," William said viciously. Yesterday, he had been brutally taught a lesson by Joey, and now he had a chance for revenge. Simultaneously, he was setting up favorable conditions for his escape. Joey was a formidable opponent, and even if he managed to break free later, there was a chance she might seize an opportunity to apprehend him. The unexpected demand from William took Joey aback, but it seemed she had no choice but to save the hostage. In the next moment, Joey grabbed her gun and aimed it at her left leg. "Hold on," Caspian shouted while swiftly dodging away. His sudden yell caught William off, leaving him momentarily stunned. Caspian seized this opportune moment and acted swiftly. Willow and Zoe, who stood nearby, were overcome with fear and couldn't bear to watch the incident any longer. A deafening gunshot reverberated through the air. Joey stood frozen as she tried to understand what had just occurred. Yet, she could clearly feel that the gun in her hand had vanished. The people around were filled with terror upon hearing the gunshot. Joey glanced at Caspian, who was standing before her. She noticed him raising a pistol and aiming it directly at William and Carmen. The spectators were frozen in shock and fixed their eyes on William and Carmen. They witnessed the horror-stricken expression on William's face. His eyes were wide and his body immobile, all because of the newly formed bullet hole on his forehead. In a split second, Caspian seized the opportunity. He'd snatched the gun from Joey and fired a shot at William. Joey was utterly dumbfounded after witnessing the scene. The spectators around wore expressions of disbelief as they looked at him. None of them had expected everything to unfold so swiftly. Caspian's actions were too rapid for anyone to comprehend, yet William had already been fatally shot. His extraordinary skills took everyone by surprise. Although William held Carmen hostage and stood behind her, her petite frame failed to shield William's head effectively. Caspian had seized this opportunity to wrestle the pistol from Joey's hands to deliver a lethal blow. He navigated the battlefield with expertise, eliminating countless enemies with precision using his firearm. It was his confidence in his abilities that allowed him to pull the trigger. Dealing with societal menaces like William on the spot was deemed the best course of action. During the crowd's shock, Caspian dropped his pistol and swiftly took another huge step forward. William's body began to lean backward, but his hands remained on Carmen's shoulders. The glass shard in his grip posed an imminent threat to her. In a flash, Caspian materialized in front of Carmen and swiftly snatched the glass shard from William's hands to rescue her. William's lifeless form collapsed with a thud, a fate he could never have anticipated. Willow was deeply impressed when she witnessed Caspian get rid of William with a single move. She knew he was highly skilled, but the extent of his marksmanship had caught her off guard. At this moment, Carmen was overwhelmed with fear. She found it hard to believe that she had emerged unscathed. In that intense moment just now, she felt something rush Nassar above her head as she watched Caspian raise his pistol in her direction. "You're safe now," Caspian said expressionlessly to the stunned Carmen. She snapped back to reality. Her gaze shifted to William, who lay in a pool of blood, and her body trembled with fear. Carmen let out a startled cry and buried herself in Caspian's arms. Then, she clung tightly to him. Her voice was choked with tears. Caspian was momentarily surprised as he hadn't expected her reaction. Willow was standing right next to him, and there were still plenty of people in the hall watching them. However, he understood Carmen's emotional response. After all, she had been severely frightened by the recent events. It was a natural reaction for her to seek comfort after this incident. Caspian didn't push her away now. Instead, he reassured her by saying, "It's all over, you're safe." As he spoke, he gently patted her back. She continued sobbing loudly, as she had never before experienced such a terrifying ordeal. Willow witnessed the scene and didn't feel a hint of jealousy. After all, Carmen's reaction was solely due to the shock of the recent events. Willow and Zoe approached and extended words of comfort to Carmen. Both had witnessed too many gruesome scenes recently, making them somewhat desensitized to this. The battle Caspian had faced earlier had been 100 times more gruesome than they witnessed now. Joey took a moment to regain her composure. Then, she picked up the gun from the ground and approached William. She confirmed William's death after she saw his lifeless state. Soon after, more inspectors arrived at the scene. They swiftly established a perimeter to secure the area of the scene. "Quick, help the injured. Quick, help them," Joey shouted urgently as she witnessed her colleague lying on the ground in a critical state. Doctors used a stretcher to transport the injured inspector to the emergency room. At this point, Carmen's emotions began to stabilize. She gently withdrew from Caspian's embrace. "Thank you for saving me." She expressed her gratitude. "It's nothing, don't mention it," Caspian replied. They then introduced themselves to each other. "Thank you all." Carmen thanked him again. "You're welcome. You should go and check your wounds," Caspian advised her. She nodded and turned away. Meanwhile, Joey approached Caspian and looked at him. Her voice was cold as she said, "Follow me to the office of Inspector General." Chapter 90, The Inspector General's Thoughts. "Why must I head to the office of Inspector General?" Caspian hesitated. Wasn't this just about apprehending a criminal? If Sylvia found out he'd been taken to the Inspector General's office, she'd undoubtedly order her troops from outside the city to storm the place. Caspian held a favorable view of Joey, as her recent actions to save lives were truly commendable. Nevertheless, he was reluctant to deploy city troops over a minor incident. "You had killed someone, so you need to provide a statement at the office of Inspector General," Joey stated. "I stepped in just now to save a life." "You saw the situation back then," Caspian explained. "You took my gun, ignored the hostage situation, and fired recklessly. It was a dangerous move. You must clarify your actions at the Inspector General's office," Joey insisted. Willow and Zoe found Joey's decision to confront Caspian unreasonable. After all, Caspian had saved Carmen. Instead of being thanked, he was now facing the prospect of arrest, which struck them as profoundly unjust. Dangerous move. What was so dangerous about it? The results speak for themselves. William was neutralized, and Carmen was unharmed. Caspian sighed. He continued, "If it weren't for my intervention, you might be nursing a broken leg now and watching William escape. You were fortunate to shoot William. You're not a part of the Inspector General's team. Who gave you the authority to use a gun?" Joey retorted. "You must be out of your mind. It's called being a good Samaritan. Can just anyone waltz into the office of Inspector General? You don't even have any basic knowledge," Caspian said impatiently. He hadn't expected any rewards, but he certainly didn't want more trouble. Joey was brimming with anger. What gave this useless Caspian the right to insult her? Despite knowing he had rescued the hostage earlier, she did not have a good impression of him. "What do you know?" William was crucial as he was a member of a fraudulent gang. "We were planning to follow his trail and capture all of these culprits, but now, You've killed him directly and cut off all leads. Joey voiced her frustration. How is that my concern? This is the inspector's business, Caspian replied expressionlessly. Joey fell silent as she was unable to counter Caspian's argument. Without leads, the Office of Inspector General can figure it out independently. If Carmen had been killed, your office wouldn't escape responsibility, right? I saved her for you. Didn't even get a thank you. And now you want to make trouble for me. Is this how your office operates? Caspian continued. Joey was left speechless by Caspian's words. Every point he made was entirely reasonable, leaving Joey unable to counter any of them. After all, he had not only rescued Carmen, but also ensured they remained unharmed. In that high-pressure situation, Joey hadn't been confident about landing a single shot on William, yet Caspian had managed to do it effortlessly. Willow and Zoe looked at Caspian with surprise. When did he become so eloquent? Wasn't it excessive to leave Joey speechless like that? Can we go now? Caspian asked nonchalantly. Being taken to the Office of Inspector General would throw a wrench into his plans. If Sylvia found out he was taken to the Inspector General's office, her troops stationed outside the city would indeed converge there. Those troops were intended for handling the Inspector General's chief, and mobilizing them for Joey simply wasn't worth it. Hold on. Joey called out again. Is there anything else? Caspian stopped and inquired. I found some leads on the murder of Lilith, Joey said. Tell me more details about that, Caspian said. Upon hearing Joey's words, Willow suddenly felt uneasy. Lilith seems to have tried to save someone, but was killed instead, Joey said. Although this case had happened some time ago, she didn't believe it was that simple. So, she had privately conducted an investigation. After all, it was her duty as the head of the criminal investigation team to uncover the truth behind every case. However, the evidence from the time of the incident had been destroyed, making it quite challenging to reveal the whole truth. I've already got the details on this, so you don't need to bother about it, Caspian responded with some surprise, as he was not expecting Joey to look into the case actively. Yet, he was well informed about the whole story, and he knew that Lilith had been wrongly accused. Don't worry, I'll get to the bottom of this and restore her reputation, Joey affirmed with determination, even though the lead she had found made the case quite challenging to crack. Suit yourself. Caspian waved his hand dismissively. It was clear that Joey had a good heart. Caspian then left the hospital with Willow and Zoe. In the Office of Inspector General, Ezekiel had just finished a call with Nadia. He had learned that Caspian had gone on a killing spree tonight, prompting Nadia to request the inspector's intervention to apprehend him. After hanging up, Ezekiel took a moment to reflect. He certainly wanted to capture Caspian, but he couldn't afford to rush into action. Caspian's wedding last month had even drawn the attendance of John, a senior military officer from the South Aridlands. Rumor had it that Caspian had saved John's life, and Ezekiel wasn't willing to risk challenging that connection between Caspian and John. Even though Sylvia's title was a sham, John was undoubtedly a genuine senior military officer from the South Aridlands. Ezekiel conducted his affairs with utmost caution to maintain his current position. The higher his position, the more cautious one had to be, as any misstep could be irreversible. He was well aware that without the support of the York family and the Flying Dragons, he wouldn't be sitting comfortably in his current role. However, arresting Caspian required even greater caution. John was a figure Ezekiel couldn't afford to provoke. Caspian dared to commit murder, indicating that he had supporters operating in the shadows. However, dealing with the York family wouldn't be a walk in the park, especially their heavyweight, Zachary, the regional chief in the Two Lakes area. Without Zachary's direct intervention, Ezekiel decided it wasn't the right moment to make a move. Caspian had personally chauffeured Willow to the South Lake Corporation for her work. The Rolls-Royce had remained at the corporation since the previous day, so Willow was without her usual mode of transportation. Caspian was concerned about the optics of a high-ranking executive arriving at the office in a cab. Moreover, He was concerned that members of the Flying Dragons might target her again, so he planned to provide her with personal protection in the coming days. Once they arrived at the South Lake Corporation building, Willow quickly exited the car and entered the office building. Caspian also entered the building after waiting a short while to ensure she had safely entered.